Life's too short to drive boring cars. It's a sad story today. This week, Porsche has had some recent issues with some engines in some of their brand new 2021 model year cars. If it weren't for the fact that Porsche is truly synonymous with performance driving, all of their vehicles are built to a higher standard than your average garden variety Lexus, for example. Now, while Lexus is a super reliable car for people that drive from A to B and pick up your groceries and tool around to pick up the kids from school, it rarely sees RPMs higher than 3,000 or 4,000. A standard engine with mediocre internals is all it takes to keep that car on the road. But unfortunately, Porsche is a different game. Have you heard the recent recall by NHTSA that addresses the Porsche 718 Boxters and 718 Caymans? For example, like this. This is a recent late model Boxster. Now, originally the Boxsters came with a flat 6 naturally aspirated engine. Then recently, in the last few years, they changed it up and they went with a turbo 4-cylinder engine to satisfy emissions. They resulted in the same output. Actually, the car was even marginally faster than the outgoing flat 6. Enthusiasts were scoffing at that and they wanted a naturally aspirated engine back. Doing this, the new engine now for this year is a 4-liter flat 6 naturally aspirated engine that goes into some of these 718 Spiders, 718 Boxsters, and 718 Caymans. How you can best recognize, we have a Boxster here. This means it's a convertible, and as you see here, it's a 718 Boxster S. So the 2021 model years of this car is one impacted by it. And as you see, the 718 Spider right here, this is identified by Spider written on it. And as you can see, it has a little different look than the standard garden variety Boxster. But this is a mid-engine car, and as you can see down here, tucked under there is where the engine is located. This one here, being a 718 Spider, is one that's potentially impacted if we're talking about 2021 model years. And then you have the actual Cayman, which essentially is the same thing as a Boxster coupe, meaning this is a hard top. You have 2021 model years of these cars that have an issue with the connecting rods. The problem with that is the connecting rods are the part that connects your pistons to your crankshaft. That's what essentially carries the reciprocating mass. If you have a weakness anywhere in that connecting rod, from the rod bearings to the rod bolts to the connecting rod itself and the wrist pin, all through there's a few points are potential failures. If you have any looseness, sloppiness, or failure within that link, you could see a potential failure. And that's what they're saying. There's 190 cars that Porsche has recognized that there's a problem. And the problem is hardware could potentially loosen off. If it loosens off at higher RPM, there's a great probability that that engine comes apart at the seams. If it does, that could result in any number of catastrophic failures. From the rod coming disconnected from the crankshaft, meaning you've got loose parts moving in there at a high RPM, that will guaranteed to result in parts either coming through the case or possibly just coming unglued. Either way, when any part of the system comes disconnected, it is a catastrophic failure, usually resulting in damage to the block, the head, the pistons, the valves, or anything in between. It could actually result in oil leak, antifreeze leak, a hole in the side of the case, possible fire, and in a worst case scenario, could you imagine doing 250 kilometers per hour on the Autobahn and all of a sudden the engine jams, seizes stiff because of something seizes internally in the engine and those rear wheels lock up? What do you think that's going to result in? Obviously, it's not a good scene, and that's why this recall is now identified by NHTSA so that Porsche can get these 190 models from 2021 rectified as soon as possible. Now, apparently there's many owners that have already been notified, and the ultimate fix for this really is nothing short other than either an engine rebuild for current owners that have the cars in their possession, or the factory will likely take the car back and transplant an entirely fresh engine with the new and revised connecting rod parts. Now, failures and Porsche aren't necessarily new to each other, although the brand is extremely robust. Think back the Porsche 997 and the 996 that suffered potential IMS, that's intermediate shaft bearing failures. That's been an ongoing issue with that generation of engine, as well as the older original Boxsters had the same infrastructure and potentially the same failure mode. We also can't forget about the 997 generation like we see behind us here, where they had cylinder scoring related to overfueling. It would wash the cylinder of oil and eventually you'd wind up with scoring as a result, and ultimately a low compression is the final problem with that. Either way, Porsche takes great pride in the performance engines that they develop and build, and they wouldn't have a weakness anywhere along the way, and that's why they're bringing this up. If you're dealing with a garden variety car, they likely wouldn't even be a problem because these vehicles were never generally intended to be subjected to the same sort of hard driving and hard use that a rear engine or mid-engine Porsche is intended to. And that's why Lexus can hold a candle to a Porsche. Hope to see you guys real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.